Hi, everyone. Happy Monday or Tuesday, depending on where you're joining us from today. I'm Kyler Cheatham. I am honored to be your host today for the Elite Eight conversation around small business software vendor selection. And I am joined by my good friend and colleague, Christy Barber. And before I let Christy kind of introduce herself, as she's really the expert, I'm just, keeping everyone organized today. I want to just go through a few logistics. If you joined us last week, which I'll show you the bracket, we started with our Sweet 16 and went to our Elite 8 round of the March Madness. And what we're really focusing on is software selection, ERP specifically, for small to medium sized businesses. A lot of times we can see brand name titans, the SAPs, the Oracles of the world be kind of forefront in looking at what is an ERP system, but there's actually, in my humble opinion, a lot better options when it comes to tier 2 solutions, especially for our SMBs out there that might not have the biggest budget or feel really like a small fish in a huge sea of software vendor jargon. So we are here to be your navigator, your captain, if you will, through that voyage. So before we get started, this is an interactive session. The mission of this conversation is to showcase all of the options out there because it truly does depend on what is best for you. So please engage in the chat wherever you're joining from today. You can pop in which you vote for or which you'd like to see as far as different head-to-head matches. We're going to go through specifically 8 of our software vendors today that have progressed from the last round, but it's so helpful to have engagement or good questions from our audience. So with that, let's just do a quick test of the chat and just drop, wherever you're joining from today and your favorite quote unquote ERP system. If you have one, feel free to tag them in the comments. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I will just flash up our bracket here so you can kind of see where we're at. And then we will have Christy kind of take us through what this looks like. So if you can see my screen here, the bracket, we went from all of the outside systems to these Elite 8. So today we'll do a head-to-head matchup of NetSuite versus Shopify. Then we'll do Sage versus QuickBooks. We'll do Workday versus UKG. And then Infor versus Epicor, which I know everybody is terrified for that one. I personally am because they're so hard to pick from, both great systems. But really, we're focusing on the small to medium-sized business community that we want to focus on today. So with that, Christy, will you just give us kind of a quick intro of why we're having this conversation and why kind of your clients struggle in this selection conversation?
Yeah. I think there's so many software solutions out there that it's overwhelming, especially when you're in the SMB market. You hear the big names out there and you think, oh gosh, do I have to go with this? Is there something more geared towards my size of business? And so that's the whole purpose of this, is enlightening you guys on what's out there and what is available for you to choose from. So it's not necessarily just the big names that you see on TV that have to be, your choice, but being able to understand better all of these solutions and how they work in the SMB world.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we're definitely grateful to have you here to kind of take us through this conversation. So with that, let's get into our first head-to-head matchup. So just a reminder of where we're at. So we had Magento, which is now called what? I can't even remember.
Adobe Commerce.
Adobe
They
Commerce.
got bought out.
Yeah, Adobe Commerce, Magento versus NetSuite. NetSuite won that matchup. And then we had Acumatica versus Shopify, in which Shopify won that. So now we're looking at NetSuite versus Shopify. This head-to-head is very, very different. I would almost see like Shopify kind of being our Cinderella story type of thing and the underdog of this conversation. But to me, I think it's a very viable solution. But let me just kind of go over some key differences and just some key functionalities between the two. And then I'll let Christy kind of talk about the commentary here. Of course, we want you guys to vote in the comments, NetSuite or Shopify. and why. So NetSuite is really kind of, I would call it the leader in small to medium sized businesses ERP systems. It really is, though, for the larger side of the SMB marketplace. We qualify SMB as anybody under 500 million. That is still a very big business. So a lot of times, NetSuite is looking at those medium to large size clients. Shopify is primarily an e commerce platform. It does have elements of ERP functionalities, but with a lot of third party integrations that you'll need to manage in there. So when we're looking at key differences between the two, NetSuite is robust. It's going to scale with you for a long time for your business. It's also got a lot of supports like multi currency or complex product configuration. Shopify is also scalable, but you're going to reach a cap when it comes to Shopify of what you can handle for an ERP system, right? That's what we're kind of talking about today. It does have some advanced functionalities which can look at business expansion, but it is primarily that kind of best of breed e-commerce solution. The one thing I'll really focus on is three kind of bigger buckets today. And I'm curious your thoughts on those. I'm going to talk about cost, ease of use, and market presence, because I think that's really a big piece of this. Cost, Shopify wins hands down. It is far less expensive and the licensing it is much more user friendly, but you have to look at that total cost of ownership, right? With those third party integrations, how much do those cost and how much does it cost for you to manage? NetSuite is generally more expensive because it has a more comprehensive offering. Anything you would add on the cost piece of these two, Christy?
I think there's a couple of things that are unique specifically about Shopify, depending on how you're utilizing it. Shopify, when you get to the point where you're not the tiny user on Shopify and you're more the enterprise user, they do take a percentage of your revenue each month.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how they incorporate their monthly fees. And so that's something to kind of think about when you're looking at an e-commerce solution. Is it a company that takes a percentage of my income for the month, or is it based on number of transactions? And there's everything under the sun out there. And I'm actually going through this with a client right now and narrowing it down to what e-commerce platform do we want and what makes most sense with their growth strategy and cash flow and all of that when it comes to pricing.
Yeah, e-commerce is super tricky, especially because it totally depends on what you sell and why. So, um, and so let's talk a little bit about kind of ease of use. Shopify is more known for its intuitive interface. It really is plug and play to set up. Sometimes on the enterprise side, you might need more complex configurations depending on what your current stack is. But it also has an extensive amount of technical training materials that you can access very quickly, that's well organized. NetSuite is more of a complex setup because it's more of a complex system, but it does also provide integration capabilities, but it does sometimes require more technical knowledge. The one thing I always want to say to this, just because a system requires more technical knowledge doesn't mean you don't need that technical knowledge in-house when you have a more open source system or a highly integrated system. You need someone from the IT team or an outside managed service partner to really help you manage those and make sure that you're looking to make sure they're not broken when you push an upgrade or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything on the ease of use side that you would mention in this analysis?
I think, again, with Shopify, it is really easy, plug and play. They have templates that are in there to get your website set up. You can integrate it pretty easily with other payment solutions like PayPal and Stripe and all of that inside Shopify. It does international. It helps you connect to various states when you need to start collecting sales tax, when you hit those thresholds, and it notifies you of, hey, you probably need to get this one set over here if you don't want to get caught and have to, get audited because you weren't paying your sales tax. And so that part of it makes it really great for that. And Shopify does have some other features that we could highlight really quick that I think are beneficial for people to know is they do have
Mhm.
a point of sale system inside of it. So if you
Mhm.
are a brick and mortar store, you can utilize their point of sale system similar to how you would have Square or something like that. It's a same like an iPad. And I had a client, it's been a year and a half ago now, that went with that solution that has multiple retail stores, but also has a really big e-commerce presence. And
Mhm.
that is what made the most sense for them.
Mhm. Yeah, and that really is the thesis here, right? It really truly depends on what makes the most sense for you, and that you're having someone that's helping you go through that analysis, not the vendor, not the SI, not your neighbor, right? Someone that actually understands what your enterprise goals are and what that really looks like to be able to have a full analysis of, okay, I know the difference between these two systems on paper, but what does it mean for me and my goals and what I need, right?
Exactly.
So let's get to some of these questions over here. Great questions. Thank you so much for adding them here. So, how does Shopify's built in e commerce functionality compare to NetSuite's e commerce capabilities or Suite Commerce Advanced?
Mhm.
That's one name of what NetSuite can provide on the e commerce side.
Yeah. And it's a funny thing, I just went through a semi demo of that last Friday of we're looking at NetSuite compared to a different e-commerce solution, but just being able to see how easy their solution is as well to it's kind of more of a plug and play, it's ready
Mhm.
to go, which makes it really simple. It's already integrated into NetSuite. So it's, all of your data is now living in NetSuite as opposed to when you're using a Shopify and you're having to API that type of information into
Mhm.
the ERP.
Mhm.
This kind of takes away the middleman software that has to come in and do that,
Mhm.
or even a direct API. And I think NetSuite's e-commerce solution has come a long way from what it used to be. It's
Mhm.
gotten a lot better. There's still things that Shopify does better when it comes to e-commerce. And I know you'll agree with this too, is so many ERP solutions, they want to be everything to
Mhm.
everybody and hit every module possible. And
Mhm.
while they can do that well, they're not necessarily the expert in that. And
Mhm.
it's still the people that are just that specific software are usually the experts. So like your Magento, your Shopify's, all of that, because they only spend R&D on e-commerce and bettering it and all of that. But
Mhm.
as far as when you're first starting out, I think NetSuite's e-commerce has a great capabilities and it can sometimes keep the costs down. It's when you get to a much larger company with e-commerce, there's all these things that come in with transaction
Mhm.
costs, and NetSuite is known for having, it's based on some of those transactions and which
Mhm.
one do you fit in with that pricing tier. And when you outgrow those number of line items per month and per year, now you got to get upgraded to another one. And maybe you weren't ready to spend another $60,000-$100,000 to upgrade to that. And so there's a
Mhm.
lot of little things, again, why having an expert come in that can
Yeah.
help you dig through all of these little fine points that are in a
Mhm.
contract to better understand.
Yeah, absolutely, and really lay that out, and also, excuse me, your organization, like, what does that look like? Do you have an IT team of 2? Do you have an IT team of 0? Do you not even know what IT means? Like, all of those options are totally fine, but you have to pick a system that supports the organization infrastructure that you have. The
Mm,
architecture of the system needs to match your organizational infrastructure. If those two are mismatched, there's going to be issues, especially if you're going to look at doing something like an AI application or something like that, that is an automation tool for part of your manufacturing process, your accounting process, all of those different things. That brings me to my next question, and then we will kind of wrap this up and pick a champion here. Which platform provides stronger tools for real time inventory tracking, order management, and fulfillment automation? And this one, I just will add on, this is a lot of times what we see when we see kind of you're growing out of QuickBooks,
mhm.
right? You're growing out of that. So this is a great question for someone that's looking at, what am I going to do for my first ERP of this company that I started or that I'm leading? What does that really look like?
Yeah. So I think there's couple of different, this is more of a loaded question than a simple answer. Is when you are looking for real-time inventory, yes, Shopify does do that. You're having to log into Shopify to do that, as opposed to if Shopify is fully integrated with an ERP like NetSuite or something else, you can run a quick report inside your ERP and see the real-time
Mhm.
inventory. So it kind of just depends where you're looking. If you're using QuickBooks and you're using Shopify separate and you're just bringing in data points, it's not going to track any inventory, because QuickBooks does not track inventory well at all. And I always tell everybody, don't even go there with it. Keep it outside. But
Yeah.
both of them have really great reports that you can pull, whether it's just in
Mhm.
Shopify or whether you're in a NetSuite solution, all of that, and to know what orders are going to be fulfilled. There's also multiple layers to it, as well as when it comes to, do you have a warehouse, a third party warehouse that's fulfilling your orders, or are you fulfilling your own orders? Because then with some of that fulfillment automation, there comes in a lot of different changeover points of how the data would flow. And so that's again where it gets into those nitty gritty details of how is your business structured and what makes sense for how we want to, you know, look at your inventory real time, and how do we want to look at these automations.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry,
Long-winded
my, like,
answer.
weird did you yeah. Well, no, did you see me frozen
No.
on there? I'm like, I wonder if this is, like, just because I, like, touched my nose and my hand on my my side was frozen. I'm like, and you kind of were like, "What is she doing over here?" I'm so sorry. Distracting from the conversation. But no, not a long-winded answer. The point is that it is a long-winded answer. If these are requirements that you have, one, pat yourself on the back for knowing that those are requirements that you need. And two, find someone to take you through that selection process that knows the different options between these systems. Because you could have a very heavy inventory distribution that you need to look at NetSuite. Shopify is not for you. You could be, you only do e-commerce business and you're like, you know what? NetSuite is a lot for me and it's expensive. I'm a little nervous about it. And Shopify is a great option for you because that fits your needs. So definitely you would have different questions depending on different industries. So with that, Christy, I need like
I
a
know,
little drum
right?
roll sound effect. Which one do you pick? And of course, audience, what are you voting for? Definitely tag them in the comments. Which one would you select? Just baseline, NetSuite or Shopify? And if you need help,
You can
I
help
can
in this.
help too. And
I think this is hard because they're so different. I mean, they
mhm,
do offer similar things when it comes to the e-commerce side of it. But I would say when you're
mhm,
making that jump from QuickBooks or Excel or some kind of beginner type software ERP, going to NetSuite is a natural progression. And so I'd say I'd kind of
mhm,
lean that way. And then that
mhm,
at least gets you the foundation for a system. And then when it comes into an e-commerce, then you start having that next question of what makes sense to bring in. So it's kind of the
mhm.
taking the easy road a little bit on this, but I would have to say let's go the NetSuite route, just because for small businesses, it does make sense when you're outgrowing QuickBooks to go that route.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you have to go NetSuite in an
Mhm.
ERP conversation. From an ERP standpoint, NetSuite wins hands down. That doesn't mean it's a better option for you. If you are a heavy e-commerce SMB, Shopify should absolutely be on your short list and evaluate what that looks like, especially when we move into a more modular and flexible, agile type of architecture when it comes to the ERP of the future. But a lot of times, what we need as SMBs is to standardize. Like we need
Mhm.
a little less fluidity, right? We need a little less going on. So I think you have to choose NetSuite in this matchup specifically. Shopify is an excellent option,
It
though.
is.
So
And again, we
that's
can do
really
a
good.
separate conversation about that another time and really dive into why Shopify is great for small and medium-sized businesses when it comes to e-commerce.
Awesome. Well, next up on our lineup here, we have Sage Intact versus QuickBooks Enterprise. So, definitely another kind of conversation about small versus bigger, but a little bit different when we talk about this. So, Sage Intact is great for SMBs. It's usually always on our SMB shortlist because it's just such a great company and they do great at supporting the SMB community. They don't do a lot of big business or larger enterprise, so they definitely play to this space. They work with a lot of like multi-entity organizations. They're kind of known for that. Nonprofits are a great example of what Sage services, and definitely a great just kind of middle-sized selection, little smaller than NetSuite even, but again, great flexible ERP solution. QuickBooks, we know just from the brand name, everyone knows QuickBooks. It's really kind of the first financials reporting systems you use when you start a business, even if you're a freelancer. It kind of has more simpler financial needs, but you can run a multi-million-dollar business on QuickBooks. We see it done every single day. It can handle that. So it's definitely more of a financial system than an ERP system, but is moving kind of into the ERP space. So just going over kind of some features and capabilities, kind of what we talked about earlier versus NetSuite and Shopify. So Sage offers that more advanced financial reporting, kind of extensive automation. They've really put a lot of R&D in customization options, even though just because you
You
can
should.
doesn't mean you should. So relax around that. Yeah. It really supports a lot of complex accounting scenarios and gives that observation dashboard of those real-time insights that are so, so critical to seeing across the organization. QuickBooks, more basic accounting features, expense tracking. It has more limited customizations, but it does integrate with quite a few systems. I don't even know a system that doesn't integrate with QuickBooks to a point. So definitely great user-friendly features there, but it does lack advanced features and it's just known for not being the best vendor partner. We just kind of
Yep.
tell it like it is here. That doesn't mean that it can't change, you know. It happens a lot where they kind of see that and then they come more into that. So any additions on the differences in features and capabilities of a Sage Intacct versus QuickBooks?
I would say with QuickBooks, they're really putting a lot of money towards improving and being more of a competitor with Sage Intacct. They've just released some new things with intercompany transactions and being able to do eliminating entries, a little bit better reports. So those things are nice. But where I see a big gap is around reporting and inventory management. Again,
Mhm,
QuickBooks likes to
mhm,
tell you it does inventory management. It does not do it very well, if really at all. It's in the system. I just always say, please don't use it because it causes a lot of issues.
mhm,
Sage
mhm,
Intacct has the ability to do that. It has the ability to create, the purchase orders and you would receive against the inventory, all of those, which I really like. And the reporting in Sage is a lot more in depth. It does all of the levels of the multi dimensions, which is phenomenal to be able to really get a good idea of how your company is doing. However, on the other side of that, you can always pair up with a Power BI tool and use with
yeah,
both QuickBooks and Sage to get an even better way, even more detail of the reporting that you need. And so I have a client right now that's looking, we're evaluating QuickBooks and Sage Intacct together, and we're bringing Power BI in just because of the depth of reports and metrics they need. Neither system can do that. And so it's a nice part
mhm,
where you can pull those data points out and do that.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is so, so critical when looking at the difference between business size too, because maybe, you have an inventory system where you need 13 toothpicks and you need to count that. And it's not something that's super scary when you do manual, but then maybe you have another business that is looking at very expensive or large pieces of equipment that they're moving from one facility to another, and they need, obviously a bit more of a tracking component in there, then Sage would be likely a better option for them. Can you talk about, because I think for me, and this just might be my perception, you would know better. Can you talk about the difference between partner support between these two? Because I feel like that's a big
Mhm.
differentiator here.
Yeah. So when you look at QuickBooks, you go online, You select a pricing plan that you want, and you're basically in charge of setting it up yourself. They have lots
Mhm.
of knowledge-based articles. They also have help, but their help is all, overseas. And sometimes it's hard with language barriers and just understanding of what you really need. There are a handful of CPA firms that do provide service to help you get set up on QuickBooks. That's something that, my company does as well. We help you get all set
Mhm.
up on that. And there's other CPA firms that I've partnered with, and they go in and they'll do all the training and make sure your chart of accounts, all of this is set up, because QuickBooks is a lot of plug and play. You sign up and it's like, hey, we just created a chart of accounts for you based on you answering 2 questions. Well, that's great when you're first starting,
Mhm.
but that might not be a complex enough chart of accounts to be able to do what you need to do. And I can speak to that a
Mhm.
lot with all of these e-commerce clients I've been working with lately. QuickBooks, like, hey, we set it up sales income. Like, great.
Mhm.
That doesn't tell me anything about all of my channels that are coming in that I need to track. So then you got to go through and make
Yeah.
sure that you have, like I said, a consultant or a CPA firm making sure that's set up. Sage Intac, on the other hand,
Mhm.
is only partners. So you reach out to a
Mhm.
Sage partner, they come in, you kind of vet them like we do with all ERPs. Hey, are you a good fit? And all of the
Mhm.
questions. And they will come in and help set up the workflows and the whole entire solution to make sure it's in line with your business and the goals that you have for it. And so it's just a little
Mhm.
bit different experience. It takes longer to implement. You're looking sometimes a two and a
Mhm.
half, 3 month on a quick side,
Mhm.
where QuickBooks, you're like, hey, I could get this going in a week or a couple of days, depending
Mhm.
on what all is needed to be connected.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so is the Sage Partner Network, is that similar to like Microsoft's partner network that we know they have a lot of trouble with? Like you could buy D365, which is
Mhm.
an ERP solution, which we talk
We
about? Yes,
did.
we did. No, we talked about
Yep.
Business Central. Yeah. So Microsoft Dynamics D365 is a very robust ERP platform. It's for larger businesses typically, but a lot of times when a client comes to us, we're like, "Oh, great! Like, who is your
Yeah, because
VAR?
we
Like,
have
right?
questions.
Who Yes, yes, because that's a great system, but what they really struggle with is their partner network. I wonder if Sage experiences the same. Like it depends on the
It
partner
it
you get
really
if you're going to
does,
be
and I've
successful.
worked with different Sage partners. I've had really good experiences, and then others are subpar in a lot of ways, and so it's making sure to really vet, like, you may have a phenomenal experience with the sales team, and then the implementation team comes
Mhm,
in and it's a different experience, or it may be vice versa. I had
mhm,
a terrible experience with the sales team, but my
mhm,
implementation team is amazing, and I would like to work with this partner
mhm.
again if maybe we can shift things on the sales side, perhaps. And so
Yeah, yeah.
you do get that. So far, I haven't had any issues with Sage of not being able to show up, or anything like you would get with a Microsoft partner. All of these guys, they want to be engaged, they're very knowledgeable, and they're usually ready to start as soon as you're ready to go.
Yeah, they
They
return your
return your
phone
phone
calls,
calls and
which,
they return
is a
emails.
small win, but absolutely critical. Well, thank you for kind of breaking that down. I'm gonna go to some audience questions, and then we'll kind of crown a winner here. Then we'll be about halfway through our conversation. We've got 2 others, and they are
Yes.
head-to-head matchups. Like, I honestly don't know what you're gonna choose for the I could probably predict these first 2, but I have no idea what you're gonna choose for the other ones. So, definitely stay tuned for that. But let's get into these great, audience questions. How well do both solutions integrate with third-party apps like CRM, which is a customer relationship management tool, payroll, inventory management tools, maybe just integrations in
Integrations in
general?
general. So QuickBooks has a marketplace where you can go
Mhm,
on their app store. However, I would say they have a lot of those, but there's other third-party tools that actually work better
mhm,
to do integrations. And it's
mhm,
vetting what are going to be the best apps to, bring over the data that you need. Things when it comes to payroll is usually pretty simple because you're just bringing a journal entry over. And I have all of my
mhm.
clients use Gusto. That is, when you're on the small side, that's my favorite solution to use. I highly advise, do not use QuickBooks Payroll. It's great for many other things, not for payroll. And for that,
Okay.
I go on QuickBooks App Store and I just connect Gusto to QuickBooks. It's one click. I go in and I map what chart of accounts, and it's good to go. And that's one thing that I do really like about QuickBooks. It is that quick plug and play, and you can integrate most of your stuff. However, when you're looking at evaluating third-party apps, something that could be, again, going back to the e-commerce side, is you have very specific data points that need to come over, and QuickBooks App Store doesn't fully bring in all the details of those because it's a free app. Now you got to move to a
Mm.
third party app that you're paying for. So a good one is like A2X or Connect Books, and it goes into your Amazon store, your Etsy store, your Shopify, and it brings over what were your fees, what were your listing fees, your marketing fees, shipping, all of that, and breaks it down into a big journal entry that then matches the deposit that comes into your bank either on a daily or weekly basis, depending on, what storefront you have. So there's things like that it's easy, but it takes time to integrate those where you're
Mhm.
usually paying for it because it's a lot more complex. And I would say the same thing
Mhm.
for Sage. They also have an app store. You can go out, you can find the free ones. There's also applications that you're going to have to pay for. And it's, again, evaluating what makes most sense for your business and the data points that you need to bring over.
Mm. Awesome. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. Not every integration is
Mhm.
created equal. Just because it says it integrates. Well, just like I gave this example last week in talking about windows, right? Every window rolls down in a car. It just depends. Do you want automation in your window roll? Do you want to push a button and it goes zzz, or do you want to crank the window down? Those are the same
Mhm.
functionalities, but how well do they work? And a lot of times, if you need that integration in the demos, is a great time to ask. The challenge with QuickBooks is they don't often
They
do
don't at all. You
demos.
would be
Um,
relying on a consultant or a CPA firm to walk you through a demo of the
mhm,
solution. However, you can get a free trial of QuickBooks. That is the only software out there, and all of these that we are talking about in this March Madness, that offers a free trial that you can actually play in the solution
great point.
and get to know,
Yeah,
hey, do I like this? Do I not? Versus all the other ones, you would have to get a demo of the solution to see it.
gotcha. That's a great point. Good point. And great questions. Thank you. Keep them coming, definitely. So, last one here. How easy is it to implement and train employees on each system? Is one easier than the
I
other?
think it comes down to your employees. It's kind of a subjective question. Is if your employees are highly technical and they know things, they're going to adapt to any software solution pretty easily. If they haven't been exposed to as much technology or been through changes of going from an easier solution to a harder, you may get some more pushback on it. But if you're having good training and, I would say, great communication from day one, it's going to make that part a little bit easier too, because you need your employees to have buy-in to want to believe that this solution is going to change their lives. If you don't do that, then no matter how
Mhm,
much training you do, a lot of times they're not going to pick it up and
mhm,
want to
mhm.
do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good question in the fact that that should be part of your implementation planning, which selection really isn't a phase of the implementation, at least in my opinion. It's readiness, which is part of the
Mhm.
selection, right? So when we look at readiness of the organization to implement a new ERP system, we're considering all of these different things. If you have a good consultant, right, they're going to take you through planning each one of these. If you just call the vendor directly, they could care less if your employees are trained on the system. They might give you, some training materials, but at the end of the day, their job is to sell you software, implement the software, and then
Yep.
kind of peace out. It's not really on them, what you actually get as far as optimization. So, that said, Christy, which one are you going to choose? Sage Intact or QuickBooks
So
Enterprise?
this is an interesting one because I think as a small business, when you're first starting, QuickBooks makes sense. But again, when you start to outgrow that, then Sage Intact, just like NetSuite, is the next progression of places to go. So I think I'm going to hit Sage for our next one, just because everybody is familiar with QuickBooks and you probably already have it. and we're diving into
Mhm,
what makes sense for scalability and as you're going next. So
mhm.
then that'll be a fun head to head next week. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. That will be a very fun head to head because they often
all the
do go
time.
head to head against one another. And so that one will be a good one to look at. And I think we have to remember we're talking about ERP systems here. We're talking about small to medium sized businesses that are like, okay, I've outgrown my best of breed e commerce tools, accounting tools. I need an ERP solution. And they likely already
Mhm.
have QuickBooks. QuickBooks, as much as they want to be it, are not an ERP solution. They are, an accounting finance system,
Yeah.
kind of, right? They kind of count things. No, I'm being hard on QuickBooks. I obviously am highly triggered by partners that don't show
Yes.
up for their clients, that don't prioritize their clients. You might have a bad partner, but at least you're talking with living, breathing people that are helping you to kind of set up and optimize your tool. And Sage really does that by demoing it for you, taking it through that. But
Even coming
again,
to your
QuickBooks
office if
is
you need them to. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. QuickBooks is a great solution if you're just getting started or if you just need that kind of
Mhm.
financial piece. You just need to have somebody help you to set it up. I promise you, we set up QuickBooks for my business, and on that end, of course, we called Christy because we could not do it without her. Who could? But in that level, there were so many mistakes that we made, even as software experts. We are experts in implementing software. And there were some things about QuickBooks that we totally messed up and needed to call Christy for because that piece of it, that setup is just it's so worth having that CPA or that independent consultant come in and say, all right, like what are you trying to do in this conversation? And then configuring it the best way that you can. So, all right. We got a time check here. We got about 20 minutes. So we're going to spend 10 minutes on each and keep those questions coming because these two are pretty hard. So now we are going on to the of the HCM, human capital management. I know we're talking about ERP systems here. These are both technically ERP systems, but they do specialize in that human capital management piece of that. So we are looking at Workday versus UKG. A lot of people know UKG as Kronos. We call it UKG now. So Workday, let's kind of dive into that. Well known in the marketplace, very comprehensive cloud-based HCM solution, integrates with HR, payroll, financial management. It's used by many large enterprises as just their HCM system, but it does offer ERP based solutions. I think you just need to remember that it is first and foremost an HCM solution, but great if you need to manage a lot of employees on that level. Say, you are a retail organization or you have a bunch of different franchisees and that type of thing. You need to manage a lot of people. This is a great option for that. UKG also, geez, offers a robust HR and workforce management solution. It has a lot of business intelligence integrations, which it's kind of known for, and payroll services. It really focuses in strong reporting capabilities and kind of a customizable HR process. So you are really looking at kind of two head-to-head solutions here. The difference between these, I think there's three that at least in mine that I looked at, and one was just kind of integration and scope. So when we look at Workday, that is a unified platform that integrates HR, payroll, financial management, and it makes it really suitable and nicely packaged for large, complex enterprises. It also could work for an SMB if it was something that you really knew you were going to scale up to meet those HCM competencies. UKG does focus in HR, but it really has stronger, in my opinion, integration capabilities, particularly for businesses that need more of those customization pieces in something like payroll. So you have a lot of different layers of your organization that manages people and a lot of different layers of payroll within that as
Yeah.
well. So any kind of analysis on those key
No, I agree with
differences?
those, and that's exactly what I see. I think a lot of people in the SMB world, they'll bring up Workday because they're familiar with the name. They may have worked somewhere where
Mhm,
they had the solution, or
mhm,
again, you hear it just in passing with network. UKG is a little bit more suitable for smaller business just
mhm,
because it's,
mhm.
I don't know, you're getting enough, but you're not getting so much that you're paying for things that you don't need. I think that's the biggest
Yeah,
part of it, and I had a franchise I worked with a couple of years ago, and we specifically looked at UKG. They had 12 stores and being able to manage their
mm,
people, and that one made more sense
yeah,
than Workday just because they didn't need the added complexities that Workday has to
mhm,
bring to their team, nor did they have anybody to really help manage the solution, and that was the biggest
yeah,
thing, too. They're like, "Hey, we have one IT guy, and he kind of knows this stuff, but not really. What's going to be the better
mhm,
solution for us to use?"
mhm. Yeah, and those are definitely considerations. The one thing I will mention for Workday is it has a lot of
It does.
R&D that it puts into emerging technologies like AI, machine learning. It really is kind of on the forefront of that talent management when it comes to automation. Like if you're looking at for things like tools in employee succession and development and those types of more kind of robust needs, say you're like a school district or something like that and you need to consider that piece. But again, we don't typically consider a lot of school districts small to medium
No,
sized businesses. But I would say between the two of them, when you look at the ones that are putting more money in research and development, I think Workday
I
wins
agree.
that
Yeah,
race.
big time. And you see Workday, you see them in school districts more. You see them working with the larger nonprofits, and even a nonprofit
Mhm.
I worked with. Gosh, it's been like 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, we looked at it was PeopleSoft before it went to UKG, and we
Yeah.
were looking at that to manage
Mhm.
900 people. And it was crazy
Mhm.
because they had such an influx of only during the summer did we get to 900. The rest of the year was 400, and
Yes. Yeah.
it's going to find those specific things of, can the software work with the ebbs and flows of employment also? What does that look like? Can we average those costs out, or am I stuck paying X dollars per month whether I have 900 employees or not? And that was something they were able to really work with the client and get them to a fair price to take care of all those influxes of people that would come and go.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's a great use case for that. If you have heavy seasonality in your business, like really understanding what that looks like. And I think we have to talk about
Mhm.
pricing in these. Like that is a huge differentiator in my opinion between these two. Workday is expensive because you're paying for the best of the best when it comes to there's a reason, that the biggest businesses in the world use Workday as an HCM component because it's the best. It is the best HCM system on the marketplace. I don't care who you are. You can argue with me all day
They
long.
are.
They just are. That's what they were built for. UKG has a bit more competitive pricing and it's usually more cost effective for mid-sized businesses. There are certain tiers to the organization, which Workday has tiers too, but you really need to think about like what the budget is for these different pieces. So a lot of times Workday, if we're doing a cost analysis for an SMB, are kind of work their way out naturally because they are
Mhm.
just
It
expensive.
may have everything you need and desire and want, but it's just you're like,
Yeah.
I can't afford that yet."
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the
Mhm.
Louis Vuitton I'll get someday. Someday will I walk for sure. Will it be while I have, 2 kids eating me out of house
Probably
and
not.
home? Probably not. Like so it just happens to be that way. And on that side, two great systems. And let's look at the comments over here. Um, let's see. So if your company is scaling quickly across multiple states and countries, you're a very high growth small business here. What platform provides better support for global payroll or labor laws and compliance?
I would have to say Workday on that just because of
Yeah.
how much they've put into it. Not that UKG can't do it, because I'm working with a global
Mhm.
company right now that has it, But I would just say workplace or Workday, sorry, has some of those added features.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have another question here. If your team is resistant to new technology or has limited HR IT support, which system provides a smoother implementation and better ongoing support?
That one's tricky because you can always
It is.
buy support plans with the vendor and your implementation partner, and they're managing it for you. So there's always that workaround if you have little to no team at all. But at the end of the day, I think UKG is a little bit easier to manage when you have a smaller team compared to Workday. But again, that one kind of comes down to what skill sets does your IT department have, and
Mhm.
also how much are you willing to pay the partner to just manage everything for you.
And I'm going to take because he asked me to, so I'm going to take a
Yeah.
different approach on this question. I'm going to say that UKG wins out on support because they are the ones, at least in my experience, I've seen show
Yeah.
up as a partner. Workday, they're not really concerned about small to medium sized businesses. That might be a part of what they're working to develop. Just like a lot of times I say SAP doesn't care about the public sector, and they've proved me dead wrong in the last year. They've shown up and really become more focused on that area of our industry. So that doesn't mean that that's not something that can change. I think that we have to look at who
Mm.
shows up to meet you where you are as a partner. And to me, UKG
Yeah.
would win that
Easy.
over Workday in this
Yep.
conversation. So, all right, Christy,
It's
it's
time for the
time.
hard one.
Which one? Which one do you choose? Workday
I would
versus
say
UKG?
UKG just because they're more targeted to the SMB. Again, not to
Mhm.
say that your company wouldn't grow to get to a Workday, but it's just somewhere to start where it's more in line with pricing.
Yeah, I would have to say that too. Again, if you're looking for a heavy HCM, keep Workday in your shortlist for sure. But every single time I've seen Workday involved in an ERP selection for an SMB, it's
Mhm.
just simply too expensive. Just like when we look at, we just did an evaluation for an MES with SAP versus Infor versus a variety of others. And SAP was just $2 million
Yeah.
just in licensing fees over the rest of them. Can they do a great job? Absolutely. Is that what the client is looking for?
Mhm.
Sometimes, but in the SMB world, cost is a huge priority. And I think you have to
Yeah,
go with UKG in that
I would agree.
conversation. Very cool. Okay. So this one is by
This is
far the
the real
hardest,
this is
by
the hard
far.
one.
We even talked about like how we're going to do this before we came on stage because this is a very, very challenging head to head. But something, if you're involved in an SMB selection, you're likely going to have this conversation, especially when you're in heavy manufacturing. Definitely these two go head to head all the time. Epicor versus Infor. So they're both ERP providers. They both offer a range of solution, but so you really need to do a detailed comparison on these two. They have really the same sort of functionalities: supply chain management, inventory, operations, finance, HR, CRM. Um, Infor is known to be a bit more targeted to manufacturing. It's often involved in a lot more of the MES conversations, but really in our Epicor can do
Yeah.
the same type of thing. So when we come to key differences, it's hard to find with these two. They usually are the same sort of market presence and base. I would say Epicor does usually go into Canada, the UK. Sometimes it can have a bit more of a global presence. Um, when it comes to industry focus, both solutions look at manufacturing distribution. Epicor, a little bit more in retail and a strong focus in formal processes in like metal fabrication or aerospace and defense. Infor looks at food and beverage. They also do a lot in aerospace. They are in automotive. They do a lot in healthcare. They do provide specialized tools for each sector, which I really like about Infor is they have, these certain modules that come in and say, oh, this is our healthcare applications and things like that. Epicor can also do hybrid models, allowing, businesses to really scale their IT strategy. Infor does a lot of cloud-based infrastructure. They are often powered by ASW or AWS. I'm sorry. I'm just dyslexic over here. Anytime you make me say Epicor and Infor in the same sentence, I'm always like tripping over it. But AWS is Amazon Web Services, which offers that scalability if you do with a public cloud service. If you notice, I'm giving you a lot of
Yep.
ifs in this conversation because they truly are some great systems that look at two difference. I think the biggest difference between them is manufacturing solutions. Epicor is usually preferable for heavy manufacturing organizations requiring industry specific solutions. Infor is really ideal for targeting things like talking about an MES or looking at healthcare, looking at aerospace and defense. They have specific modules for that. But again, all of these systems can be customized. So anything you would add to that or the audience would add to that because we will need your help in voting for this specific solution because it's head to head here.
I think one thing I would add is Epicor does not do recipe-based manufacturing where Infor does.
Right.
I mean, they can
True.
kind of do it.
True.
They don't do it well. And they've all told me that when I do have clients that come in that are more in that food and beverage where we have to manage these recipes, that they don't feel like they could compete very well compared to like an N4 or somebody else that, does a lot of that. But otherwise, it's so hard to decide which is the best because essentially they do all the same things. It just might look different. Their dashboards look different. You may prefer how one looks over the other. You may like that Infor is all these little tabs inside and it scrolls, up and or what is it, left to right, and Epicor's up and down with tables at the bottom. And you may prefer that look. And a lot of it comes down to, I see a lot with planning. So when you're planning your plan on the floor, and all of my production teams, what's going to be going out there, that's where I see it come up a lot of certain times people prefer the way Infor looks when it comes to planning and your load managing, all of that, as opposed to Epicor. And I've also seen where Epicor will beat out Infor when it comes to MES because Epicor does MES so well and it's so detailed that people are happier in general with the functionality inside it. But they both integrate with every type of third-party solution out there that makes it easy. And they both work in the aerospace and defense industry where they have the CMMCs. They have all these added values in there for this. So yeah, that's why this one's so hard for me to choose because again, it's so specific to the client and what their needs are to then really be able to decide what solution's best. And I've had it on multiple projects where I will say one or over the other, and the client is like, well, we actually liked how it looked better on here, so we went that route. And that's whatever the client wants. Makes it, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, sometimes it just all comes down to, system preference on that in this conversation because they are so similar in that. So I'll share kind of like my piece behind it when we get into these audience questions. So this is a good one. Which system is easier to implement for a smaller team? Does one require extensive external consultants or is it manageable with internal resources?
I would say they're both pretty robust implementations where you're looking at a 9 to 12 month on the short side of things. If your company's more complex, then you're leaning in towards, longer than a year. But even with a client that it has a lot of IT knowledge that knows development work and things like that, it is still difficult for them to you. They would never be able to do it with all of their internal resources. You have to have external resources
Oh,
because they are the ones that know the solution in and out. They're in there developing new things. They know how to code and make your workflows the way they should be. So I'd say it doesn't really matter the size of your team or the skill set. You're going to have to rely on your implementation partner to guide you through the
mhm.
implementation.
Absolutely. And that brings me to kind of my analysis between these two. These two on a national level here in the United States or globally, they have the best of the best teams. I would a lot of times choose these two over an SAP or an Oracle because they really believe in their affiliate network. They believe in a customer eccentric approach, really focused on the solution meeting the needs of the client. The one thing it would come down to for me is how does the implementation team show up or the sales team in this conversation? And I think the bigger piece of this is knowing what your right is to ask as a client in these conversations. Because, like Christy said, you could love the sales team and then be like,
Yeah.
where's John? You're like, well, John just sold you the product,
You'll
man.
never see
The
him
rest of the
again.
team's going to be, yeah, right. You'll be here with us for
Yeah.
the next 2 years and you hate us, right? And there was no plan in place. You can always ask for a business plan in demos before you sign any contracts. I always want to encourage clients to have their vendor earn that business because they show up as a partner. They understand this is important to you. This is a huge purchase for an SMB. They need to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, making you as comfortable as possible. And to me, it would depend on the local team to see who showed up in those demos because those are the people that I'm going to be talking to. Can I meet the implementation team? You always know there's going to be shifting resources, right? So it might not always be your implementation team, but having just a lens to making sure that that's a good culture fit for your organization is so, so critical. Which brings me to my point of this question. Do you need external consultants?
Always.
Always, always. And they should be independent external consultants, not I only do Epicor, not I only do SAP. If that you require a specialist, your consultant will find one for you, right? That's their job. But they need to know if you are able to implement this, not your neighbor, not your mom, right? If you're able to look at that. Um, and then I'll go to two last questions here. I know we're a little over on time, and then we'll kind of talk about what happens next on this one because I think we might need your help in voting for this. Christy will launch a poll on her channel, and that's actually how we'll pick this winner
We
because
need
we
help on
need
this.
your help on this. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So if a company expands into new markets, add e-commerce, shifts its supply chain, etc., which ERP is more flexible?
Both of them are very flexible just because you can add any
Mhm,
solution to it. I will say Epicor does have its own e-commerce solution. It's very, very basic.
mhm,
There isn't, and when I do bring a client in that has it, they won't even recommend their own e-commerce solution because people are usually too
mhm.
far along in that. So you're bringing in, an outside solution. But I would say they're both very flexible in the ability to do this. And again, that's why it's a difficult because they they're essentially the same system built on different code in a lot of ways. um do that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. So I think when it comes to N4 versus Epicor, that's where that consultant really comes in here because it depends on your requirements. It just does. We're going to pick a winner just for the basis of our fun little experiment here. There is no winner between N4 and Epicor. There's not one that's better for an SMB. They both have competitive pricing. They both go head to head. It totally depends on your requirements, your preferences, and your local implementation team. But you won't know that unless you somehow ended up being an SMB that's done 4 ERP implementations, which would be
Yeah,
wild. That really definitely doesn't happen. But it can be something that you just need to consider. So for this one, we're going to leave it blank.
I'm cool
You
with
cool with
that.
that, Christy?
It will
Okay.
save
So we
face with
will
all
announce.
my partners at Epicor
I
and
know.
Infor. So guys, I'll let you guys vote
And
for
I'll be sure to
yourselves.
go into your poll. Yeah, and tag some people to, like, just get messy in the comments like I
Yes.
always like to do with our vendor partners, to let you know. So next week, we will go into the final four and then pick the finals, as well. So we have two that we already know we're going to look at. We're going to look at NetSuite versus Sage, and then we're going to look at UKG versus either N4 or Epicor. But we're going to let you guys choose that, because
Yeah.
we want you to, on that level. And then we're going to go into the championship round of really which one is the winner. So next week will be kind of the final series of our March Madness, where we'll do Final Four and our championship. So definitely meet us same time next week. I know we did just have a question pop in here about blockchain. Do you want to take that one, Chrissy, or do you want me to, go into blockchain? I know blockchain is something that can
Yep.
benefit some SMBs if they understand what the blockchain technology is. Just like when we have AI, like if you understand that and have the data foundations to know what blockchain is, but that a lot of times that takes a very specific type of SMB, but can it benefit
Oh
it? Oh
yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. As long as you know how to use it. And a lot of times that takes kind of a specialized piece. What would you
I would
add to that
add
in just
to
closing?
it brings in a lot of where you can really utilize cost reduction. I think that's the biggest thing that
Mhm.
blockchain can bring in for the SMB world. And that's, again, you're coming down, you're automating things, you're reducing various costs. What's it called? It comes up a lot of times with the reduction of like credit card fees and things like that. And that
Yeah.
is really helpful for small businesses, especially because merchant fees and all that continually to go up and they get passed along. And then also, I think there's the added value when it comes to security protection that blockchains
Mhm.
brings that the other
Mhm.
solutions don't at much. And I feel like there's so much that we could talk about this. But for Daniel,
I
I would
know.
love to do a separate video on this and talk more in detail on
Yeah.
it if you're open to that, or if you want to keep writing more questions in there, happy to make more videos about it or even just respond back to you.
Yeah, I mean, like smart
Yep.
contracts, automated agreements are huge for SMBs, loan processes. Like we could go into so many different pieces. So definitely stay tuned, Daniel. We appreciate that. And then I'll tag Christy in the comments here. But thank you all for joining us today. Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank you.
Christy, for taking us and sharing this wealth of knowledge. I feel like this series will be something that we'll send to all SMB clients because it's just so helpful to have that comparison to kind of go through. The first thing on your homework list, my SMBs, is to go through those requirements, understand your readiness. Definitely pop into Christy's DMs or even mine, and we can talk about what that really looks like for you. So, with that, we will see you all next week at 2 p.m. Eastern Time here in the US, for our Final Four and our championship and crown who is the best ERP system for SMBs. So, thank you so much. We'll see everybody next time.